I'm AJ Gary. I'm the director of the Arkansas Division of Emergency Management. And today we're with Jodi Lee, who is the Deputy Director of Recovery and Mitigation. So, Jodi, tell us a little bit about your office and what your role is during or after a disaster.
Okay. So we do have the recovery and mitigation sections, and essentially both sections manage the state and federal grant programs for recovery and mitigation. A lot more goes into that. Disaster recovery is, the recovery of infrastructure and people after an event, and mitigation is measures you put in place to eliminate future damage or risks before or after an event.
So when a community experiences a disaster event, they don't recover overnight, do they?
No, they don't. It can take years to recover. We really come in and assist with the initial recovery and what I call intermediate recovery, which would be the grant programs. Long-term recovery for a community takes years, and we also can assist with that. We help communities and voluntary groups that are working on long-term recovery, and we've been doing that with several communities for years.
Okay. So there's a couple of big programs that you utilize during the recovery, especially right after a disaster event, and that's individual assistance and public assistance. And those terms get used quite a bit. Our citizens hear that on the news. Kind of tell us the difference between what IA is and what PA is.
Okay, so individual assistance is individuals and families. It's for homeowners and renters who've been affected by an event. Public assistance, which is confusing, is actually infrastructure recovery. So it's public infrastructure recovery, mostly working with cities and counties, some private nonprofit organizations, but it's the recovery of infrastructure.
Okay. And you also mentioned earlier that you're responsible for the mitigation project. So kind of tell us what mitigation is and how it can help the resiliency of a community.
So mitigation involves a lot of planning, but it also, like I stated earlier, helps to reduce future risk. We do a lot of projects upgrading infrastructure and a lot of safe room projects, which also helps with the people. But upgrading infrastructure helps before a disaster, and then it might eliminate some of the need for recovery on the back end.
Jodi, when you were talking earlier about public assistance and you mentioned infrastructure, what exactly does that cover?
That entails things like roads and bridges, public buildings that a city or county may own, schools, things like that.
We like to brag on Arkansas a little bit, so we'll give an opportunity to do that. So tell us what every state's different on how they respond, how they recover from disasters, but Arkansas has a couple of unique things going. Tell us a little bit about that.
We do. We're very fortunate in Arkansas that we have state programs for recovery and mitigation. So we have state individual assistance and public assistance programs, but also a very good state mitigation program that we're very proud to have and very fortunate because not a lot of states do.
Okay. So if we have a disaster event, weather, whatever, here in Arkansas, it has to meet a certain amount of damage before there's a federal declaration.
Yes.
But we have a lot of events in Arkansas, so we could very easily, we do pretty much every year, we'll have an event that doesn't reach the federal level, but our state programs can reach out and assist during those times.
Yes. And we in Arkansas, we have a lot more state disasters than we do federal. Yeah. So again, we're lucky that we have those programs.
So when an individual, when they're a survivor of a disaster event, whether it's our program, state program, or whether it's a federal program, they're not necessarily going to make people whole, are they?
No, they're not. They are mainly to assist homeowners with that don't have insurance or are underinsured.
Okay, so I guess you would agree that the best way that people can recover from that storm damage is if they have good insurance.
Yes, that is the best thing to do.
And probably making sure that property values have gone up, especially over the last few
Yes.
years. So how important is that?
Well, the main thing to do is take a look at your insurance policy every year, and we've seen a lot of changes, like you said, in the last couple years. A lot of underinsured damage in the last several years. So take a look at that policy, make those changes if you need to, and make sure it's up to date with everything that you do have.
Okay. So when it's not only for homeowners, but a lot of businesses get damaged during a disaster.
Yes, yes. And, one of the things that we like to stress is make sure you know what your policy says and have it in a place you can get it if something happens.
All right. So we talked a little bit about, mitigation, and there's how much savings could that be to a community if a community is involved in mitigation projects?
It's invaluable. You have no idea until something happens, but just putting the pre-planning efforts in place, it is an invaluable investment into your community.
So I've heard a couple of comments over the years that for every dollar that a community spends on mitigation could save them $6-7 or more in disaster costs per that dollar that's spent. All right. Anything else that you want to tell us about your office and the things that your team does?
Well, the things that go into managing the grant programs, it's not just the desk work, where we also assist to make sure damage assessments are complete. My team helps write disaster declaration requests. Okay. We also pair up with FEMA when they come into the state, and the other federal entities that may come in during a federally declared disaster, and then spend years managing the back end of those grants.
You mentioned the partnership we have with FEMA and our federal partners. They come into a state when a disaster happens, federal declaration, they're bringing their team in. What kind of takes place? We set up a combined office with the feds and the state?
Yes. So when they do come in, we set up what's called a joint field office. My team deploys with them and sits in that office for the amount of time that they're here. The ADEM team also goes out and does inspections with them. So we're a true partnership.
Jodi, tell us a little bit about when FEMA comes into the state, working with the state. How does that look?
So the first thing is, if we have a large event, we do invite FEMA to come in and do damage assessments with the state and the locals. That's a very important part of the process. If the event does reach a certain threshold, which you talked about earlier, then we might receive a federal disaster declaration. So that means that FEMA comes into the state and we set up a joint field office together, and the recovery and mitigation staff deploys with FEMA to the joint field office, wherever it is in the state, and stays for the duration that field office is open. The ADEM staff also goes out with FEMA to do inspections on damaged infrastructure, and our ADEM team also works with FEMA on the individual assistance side in some of the different aspects that get turned on for that program.
So in a federally declared disaster, the state of Arkansas doesn't just turn everything over to FEMA and stay out of the picture.
We are side by side and have a good working relationship. And my role becomes state coordinating officer during a federal event. So I am side by side with the federal coordinating officer, and it's our responsibility to essentially manage the response and recovery to an event. And we partner up with them and kind of take on the same roles at that time.
A tornado, weather event comes into a community, it happens pretty quick, very little warning. What can cities, counties, what can the local government do to better prepare their community, things that they can do to make that recovery process quicker?
Well, the main thing to do is have a plan, and an all hazards plan. Disasters all kind of start the same way. So in your plan, you would include how you're going to manage your debris operation. If you're going to do any contracting, you can do pre-event contracting too. Especially for debris, it's a good idea. You don't want to have to do that at the last minute. It's more cost effective too to do that on the front end. And also talking about planning for individuals and families, having a plan too is great. Going back to insurance, make sure you know what your policy says. Have pictures of the items in your home. Have a plan on what to do when a disaster hits, to get to your safe area. But also knowing where to locate that insurance policy is good.
Sure. And when you talk about debris, that's, of course, we've all seen pictures or experienced, real time, a tornado that comes through a community, the amount of debris, whether it's from the construction of the home that's damaged or trees that are knocked down, those all have to be managed a certain way. It's not like you could throw everything together.
Correct. Debris does. And, the main thing when an event happens is to get the debris out of the way so we can open up roads and get essential services turned back on. But once you've pushed that debris out of the way, then you've got to figure out how to manage it. There are certain things that are required for reimbursement of funds in an event. So separating debris, making sure you have, if you have contracts in place, making sure those contracts, especially having them done before a disaster, that they follow state and federal procurement. And working with maybe other state agencies involved to know where to stage the debris. You can't just burn debris. You've got to have permits for that. So there are a lot of things that could go into planning on the front end that would help.
And your team at Arkansas Division of Emergency Management is always out there during that disaster and can help communities to kind of get through that piece of it and
Yes.
and work with them to make sure that they're complying with all the requirements.
Yes, and we try to get out as soon as an event happens, as soon as possible. But also we have applicant briefings after we receive a federal disaster, and we go through the whole process and explain to people what they need to do. But we are happy to work with them in blue sky days on getting those plans ready for something to happen.